Welcome to the DOT Hazmat video safety training.
Hazardous materials are used in business and industry every day. They heat our buildings, help us to clean and maintain equipment, and are the raw materials in many manufacturing processes. However, these materials can cause trouble if they aren't handled carefully. Leaks, spills, and explosions of hazardous materials can result in serious injuries to people, damage to property, and harm to the environment. And if hazardous materials get into the hands of terrorists, they can easily be transported to population centers or industrial targets with devastating results. Knowing how to handle these materials before, during, and after transport allows them to reach their destination safely no matter how they are being shipped, whether it's by highway, railway, pipeline, sea, or air. This transportation process involves many different people. Initially, someone calls in an order. Warehousing pulls the product and takes it to shipping, where it's packed for transport and sent out. Once the product arrives at its destination, it's unloaded and stored until it needs to be used. To ensure that everyone carries out their role in the process safely, the United States Department of Transportation has developed regulations addressing the handling and transporting of these hazardous materials. The regulations are often referred to as the HMR, the Hazardous Materials Regulations. You can find them at 49 CFR, parts 100 through 185. Training plays a major role in these regulations. In fact, the DOT has defined 5 different types of training for hazmat employees. This training is designed to increase each employee's awareness of the potential dangers of transporting and handling hazardous materials, demonstrate how to work with these materials safely, and enhance the security measures that are taken with hazardous materials during transport. This program will cover safety training, which includes procedures for avoiding accidents, measures to protect employees from hazards, and emergency response information. To prevent problems from occurring when we're dealing with hazardous materials, we need to follow certain procedures for avoiding accidents. The first step is recognizing when these types of materials are present. To help us out, the HMR require that information on the risks posed by hazardous materials be available to everyone who is involved in the handling and transportation process. This information enables us to anticipate possible problems so that we are ready to act. Some of the best sources of information about what types of hazards you are dealing with are warning indicators. So hazard class labels and placards are often the first things you should look for as you go about your work. They identify the specific hazards that are presented by a product that is being transported and must conform to Department of Transportation specifications with regard to shape, size, color, and the information they contain. If you have any questions about what a label or placard means, consult your supervisor or the hazardous materials regulations. There are 9 DOT hazard classes. Class 1 is made up of explosives. Class 2 consists of all gases, that is, any materials that are gaseous at 68 degrees Fahrenheit, 20 degrees Celsius, or less at standard sea level, whether they are flammable, non-flammable, toxic, or inert. Class 3 is comprised of flammable liquids, specifically those with flash points below 141 degrees Fahrenheit, 60 degrees Celsius. Class 4 is made up of flammable solids. Class 5 consists of oxidizers and organic peroxides. Class 6 includes all poisonous substances. Class 7 encompasses all radioactive materials. Class 8 contains corrosives. Class 9, called miscellaneous hazardous materials, includes any hazardous substance that doesn't clearly fit into one of the previous 8 categories. Don't forget to pay attention to other markings on the outside of packages and containers, such as "This End Up" or "Cargo Aircraft Only." They can provide important handling instructions and other valuable information about the materials as well. Shipping papers are another valuable source of hazard information. The most important thing that shipping papers are required to list is a material's basic description. The information must be listed in the following order: the material's identification number, its proper shipping name, the material's hazard class or division number, and its packing group, which indicates the degree of danger associated with the material. This information must be shown in sequence, with no additional information interspersed. Shipping papers must also contain a 24-hour emergency response telephone number that can be used to reach someone who is knowledgeable about the hazards presented by the material. This person must also have access to comprehensive emergency response and incident mitigation information. If you're looking for detailed information on the health hazards presented by a product, its safety data sheet is the place to go. The SDS contains health hazard data and first aid information that will help you take steps to protect yourself when handling the material. It will also tell you how to reduce the material's risk of fire and explosion. Instructions on other special protection measures and spill cleanup procedures can be found on most SDSs as well. Once you're aware of the risks that are posed by the products you're working with, it's important to follow proper work practices. For instance, when getting a hazardous material ready for shipment, you should only use packaging that has been approved for that material. Prepare the container and secure the product in a way that ensures it will travel safely. To comply with the HMR, you must accurately describe the contents of the container on the shipping papers. Then mark and label the package appropriately. This provides valuable information for those who handle the shipment down the line. If you're involved in loading packages of hazardous materials, you should handle them very carefully. Pay particular attention to the labeling. Remember, packages must be labeled in accordance with the regulations. Reject packages with illegible or worn-out labels. Stick to established procedures or consult your supervisor regarding the disposition of these packages. Make sure the package is undamaged. If it is damaged, don't ship or store it. Consult your supervisor regarding what you should do with it. Don't forget to follow instructions like "This End Up" and "Keep from freezing." Safely preparing a hazardous material for transport is only part of the job. Before a shipment can leave your facility, the trailers, tankers, ships, or other vehicle that will transport it must be properly placarded and in good operating condition. All vehicles should be carefully inspected before they leave. If there are any problems, they should be reported to a supervisor. And don't forget, accurate shipping papers must accompany all shipments. This will allow for quick and easy access to product information in case of an accident or other incident. If you are involved in unloading hazardous materials that arrive at your workplace, don't accept packages that are without proper shipping papers, improperly marked or labeled, or damaged in any way. Before handling any delivery, read the label and emergency response information to determine the identity of the hazardous material, the types of hazards that may be involved and their degree of danger, special procedures that should be taken when handling the material, what personal protective equipment should be worn, and any first aid that should be administered if someone is exposed to the material. It's important to anticipate possible danger. One of the best ways to be prepared is by using appropriate personal protective equipment. To determine which PPE you should be wearing, look at a material's SDS and hazard communication labels. Talk to your supervisor if you still have questions. When you're storing hazardous materials, remember to put them in their proper storage areas. taking into consideration any special requirements such as temperature levels, humidity, or exposure to light. Segregate them from other materials if necessary. If an incident involving a hazardous material does occur, it's critical that you know where to find emergency response information for that substance. In order to prevent an incident from getting out of control, you need access to precise details about the materials that are being transported. This is so important that it's specifically addressed by the Hazardous Materials Regulations in Section 172.600 Subpart G, Emergency Response Information. Subpart G requires all hazmat shippers to provide the following information about the materials they are sending out. The basic description, including the proper DOT shipping name and the quantity of the material being shipped. The immediate health hazards that the substance presents. The material's risk of fire and explosion. Precautions to be taken in the event of an accident. Procedures for dealing with spills or leaks. How to handle fires involving the material. First aid that should be given to anyone who has been exposed to the material. And an emergency response telephone number. This information must accompany all shipments of hazardous materials and be kept in the cab of the delivery vehicle near the shipping papers. Even with all this data available, one of the challenges in an emergency is making a quick and informed decision. Because of this, the Department of Transportation has developed the Emergency Response Guidebook. This guidebook provides first responders with information on the initial emergency actions that should be taken during a fire or spill of hazardous materials. Since many materials have similar hazards, the book has organized these initial emergency response actions into a number of specific guides. To determine what should be done in the event of a hazmat incident, you simply look up the material that's involved, and the guidebook will point you to the appropriate guide. The information in the guidebook is divided into 4 color-coded sections. The first 2 help you to identify the correct guide for the material in question. Use the yellow section of the book if you know the substance's 4-digit chemical identification number. The materials are in numerical order by their ID numbers. If you don't have access to the chemical identification number, you can use the blue pages in the guidebook, which list hazardous materials alphabetically by proper shipping name. Once you've found the appropriate guide number, you can turn to the orange pages in the book. They will describe the specific emergency actions that should be taken if the material is involved in an incident. Pay extra attention to entries that are highlighted. These materials have the potential to release poisonous vapors when they're involved in accidents. In addition to following the emergency procedures in the orange section of the guide during an incident, you will need to turn to the green pages to determine how to isolate the released materials and limit people's exposure. These pages help you decide how to evacuate people near the accident scene by defining 2 specific isolation areas. The first is called the Initial Isolation Zone. It's a circular area around the incident, with its diameter measured in meters or feet. The second area is the Protective Action Zone, which is set up downwind of the incident. Because wind can carry poisonous vapors for long distances, the Protective Action Zone is measured in kilometers or miles. Once the zones have been defined, they must be cleared of anyone who is not authorized to participate in activities inside the zone or who is not wearing the proper PPE. When an accident occurs involving a hazardous material, it's also important to know how to protect yourself, as well as things you can do to limit any damage to the area around you. If you are present when a spill occurs, you should follow your facility's contingency plan. You will also need to be familiar with the regulations that address reporting spills and know what authority should be notified of the situation. Knowing the location of spill cleanup kits is also important. If you have been taught how to use the kits and have been trained on the personal protective equipment you will need to wear, you can work to control the situation until a cleanup crew arrives. Be sure you know what materials are involved in the spill and which emergency procedures you should follow. Remember to safeguard the environment. Use protective barriers to keep hazardous materials out of storm drains and the sewer system. If a chemical spill puts you in danger, don't try to be a hero. Evacuate the area and notify the people in your company who are trained to clean up hazardous spills. If the incident involves a fire that is small enough for you to handle, you can try to put it out. You'll need to determine what type of fire it is so that you can choose the appropriate extinguisher. But remember, don't pick up an extinguisher unless you have been trained to use it by a qualified instructor. There are 4 different classes of fires and extinguishers to match them. Class A fires are fueled by ordinary combustibles, such as paper, wood, and many plastic products. Class B fires are fueled by flammable liquids and gases like toluene and propane. Class C fires involve electrical wiring or equipment. Class D fires involve flammable metals, such as magnesium and sodium. Once you have the right extinguisher for the type of fire you're dealing with, use the pass method to put the fire out. Pull the pin, aim the nozzle, squeeze the trigger, sweep from side to side at the base of the fire until it's extinguished. But remember, when hazardous materials are involved, the fire itself is only part of the problem. The smoke may contain toxic vapors, which could spread a great distance, and the heat generated by the fire could lead to an explosion. Consult resources like the DOT's Emergency Response Guidebook to make sure that you are protected from all of the hazards that may be present. If you find yourself in danger, leave the firefighting to the professionals. Call the fire department and evacuate the area. Whenever you're dealing with a hazardous materials incident, you also have to worry about the possibility of people coming into contact with the substance. In these situations, the SDS provides good information about first aid procedures that can be used. Where large areas of the body are affected, the SDS may tell you that a shower is the first line of defense. In this case, get the victim to the nearest safety shower if one is available. If you're on the road, look for a hose or other source of water. Remove their clothing down to the underwear and soak them thoroughly. Be careful. The water from a shower is often cold, so you need to watch out for signs of hypothermia. After the initial deluge, you can head to a locker room or bathroom if one is nearby and finish the procedure in a warmer, temperature-controlled shower. Wherever it's done, the victim should be under a shower for no less than 15 minutes. Once showering is completed, make sure the victim gets medical attention immediately. In incidents where the area of contact is small, water is still very important. The affected area should be rinsed under a hose or a faucet for a minimum of 15 minutes, then get the victim medical attention. In the event a hazardous chemical splashes into someone's eyes, the SDS will probably recommend flushing them with water. If so, they should be washed for at least 15 minutes. Be sure to know the location of the eye wash stations in your facility. If you're on the road and none are available, use an eye wash bottle or even a hose to dilute the chemical. Then get to an eye wash station as soon as possible. A full 15-minute rinse is still recommended. And as with any chemical contact, get medical attention as soon as possible. Many hazmat incidents can also create inhalation hazards. For the accidental inhalation of a hazardous substance, the SDS will often recommend that the victim be moved away from the area. Get them to fresh air and seek medical attention immediately. The reason that minimizing the time a hazardous material is in contact with the body is important is that the duration of exposure often determines how much damage the material will do. This is the period of time that you're exposed to a substance and is often classified as short-term or long-term exposure. In most cases, a short-term exposure will cause no long-term health problems. However, exposure to some hazards can cause sudden reactions or acute effects such as a rash or burn. On the other hand, long-term exposure to some hazardous chemicals can cause long-term or chronic health effects. However, if the dose and duration are low enough, a hazardous material may not cause any negative health effects at all. Handling and transporting hazardous materials safely means recognizing the hazards that you may have to deal with and being prepared to act if necessary. Let's review. Make sure you're taking the proper precautions when handling a hazardous material. Read labels, shipping papers, and safety data sheets. Wear the personal protective equipment that a materials label in SDS recommends. Know how to use the emergency response guidebook, where to find emergency telephone numbers, and who to call for help. In the event of an incident, be ready to act. Remember, it's complying with DOT regulations and participating in the required training that will help you handle and transport hazardous materials safely and securely.
So this concludes the hazmat safety training video portion. If you have any questions on this, please see your supervisor, especially about any specific safety training you need for your facility, including emergency response information and avoiding accidents. Thank you.